This episode of Lawyers Tell All is brought to you by the Intake Academy. Are you ready to convert more callers to qualified cases, rapidly qualify good cases, and transform unqualified prospects to advocates for your firm, whether you're able to handle their case or not? Visit www.intakeacademy.com and discover how to cement relationships with more of your ideal clients. Get them to commit to you and send you more referrals than you ever thought possible. Welcome to the Lawyers Tell All podcast, where Chris Mullins, the preeminent sales and communications consultant in the legal industry, shows you how it looks through lawyers' eyes. Here, innovators in the trenches provide powerful insights that help you connect with new clients, handle the sometimes harsh realities of the legal profession, and embrace the mindsets needed to succeed. Be sure to visit our website at www.lawyerstellall.com. And while you're there, subscribe to us via your favorite network. Now, lean in, tune in, and let's take a deep dive.
Hello, everyone. It's Chris Mullins with the Intake Academy and Lawyers Tell All, and I am interviewing today Dan Cotter, and I'm going to let Dan go ahead and share with you a little bit about himself.
Thank you, Chris, for having me, first of all, and really appreciate this opportunity. My name is Dan Cotter. I'm an attorney in Chicago. I've been an attorney for almost 28 years now. Hard to believe where the time went. And I'm at the firm of Howard & Howard Attorneys, PLLC, and my focus is in corporate and transactional, with a bigger and bigger slice in privacy and cyber, and a hodgepodge of other things that attract my interest. But that's kind of who I am. Our tagline at our law firm is Lawyers for Business, and we primarily and almost exclusively focus on business needs.
So what got you into that type of law? I mean, when you became an attorney, how did you get there?
You know, it's a good question. Anybody that's seen my LinkedIn profile or my resumes, it's a challenge at times. I actually started out as a litigator at a law firm after I graduated. I went to law school at night and worked by day at CNA Financial. And when I graduated, I went to Lord Bissell and Brooke, now Locke Lord. Was a litigator for about 2 years, insurance defense, construction, a bunch of other things. And then CNA called me and said, hey, do you want to come in-house in a non-litigation role? And at that time, I thought, eventually I wanted to go there. I went in-house and spent 13 and a half years in-house doing corporate, transactional, regulatory, governance, compliance, some SEC work. And then went back in private practice, did some litigating, although I was mostly still a corporate and transactional guy. And then went back in-house, tried to take a company public. And I've been back in private practice for 7.5 years. And again, I get involved in some litigation and some arbitration. I serve as an arbitrator and a mediator, but primarily I focus on the non-litigation stuff.
Yeah. Okay. And didn't you take some time off or something like that? Was it like for so many years you weren't practicing for a little while?
Before I went to law school? Yeah. So I graduated in 1988. I had an undergraduate, postgraduate scholarship from a football foundation. I got a letter in June of 1990, about 7 months into my marriage with my wife. And it said, your money's expiring. I'd passed the CPA exam. I thought, do I really want to get a master's, do something else in finance or business? And said, I'm going to come up with a brilliant idea. I'm going to try to audit a class in law school. And I called all 7 law schools in the Chicago area, said, look, I've got this money. I just want to come see if I want to do this. They all said, nah, you got to go take the LSAT. And so it was about 2.5 years between undergraduate when I started law school.
Okay, got it. Okay. Now, tell me about the book that you wrote, The Chief Justices. Tell me about that. This is an interesting title. I didn't get a chance to look it up. I said, okay, I want to know about that book. Yeah,
and I'll get you a copy. You can send me your address later. But the book, again, the genesis was when I was in law school. I came from a liberal arts undergraduate thing where you're constantly trying to connect things and make context work. And I always thought, every class, whether it was civil procedure or torts or property, you might have cases from England from the old days. You might have a case from the Virginia Supreme Court. you never really looked at who the justices were or judges that administer the justice. And so my in-laws and I started buying a lot of biographies and history of the Supreme Court. And so it really interested me in what was going on. And then I proposed a class at my alma mater law school that was a bit different, but what it turned out to end up being was a focus on one Chief Justice and one Associate Justice from a different era. But this book is really the fulfillment of what I saw as that class. And what it does is it traces the history of the Supreme Court of the United States from the beginning through current, through the 17 Chief Justices, all men that have served as Chief Justices of the United States Supreme Court. And what I try to do is make it more accessible and not a legal treatise or handbook. And so recently, my dad, who had cataract surgery about a year ago, my brother dropped off his copy. And what he calls me about periodically is he didn't think he'd be able to read it and really get it much out of it. But he said it's really fascinating how the history is interwoven, and it's really written for almost anybody to consume. And it's a fascinating history because, you know, these 17 people, 233 years have overseen the court through its various ups and downs and changes. And so it just has been interesting. And I've thought about a second book, but a lot of energy. And as you probably know, unless you've got a name or you're on TV all the time, you know, selling and making any money on books is not a retirement plan.
No, it's not. It's good for other things, but it's not good.
It is, right?
It's a good professional business card.
Right.
Right. So let's see, you talked about your path into law. And another question here that you sent me was, what do you do when you're not serving clients? I mean, we know what you've done, but what do you do now?
Yeah, so one of the things I try to do is spend as much time with my family as possible. I have two adult sons, and they both recently moved to Kansas City to work for the federal government. So we're empty nesters now. But my wife and I, we try to do yoga twice a week. I read a ton of different stuff. I post minute reviews on LinkedIn every Saturday and Sunday of each week, and more or less. Once in a while, I miss a week. Fiction, nonfiction, biography. I write a lot, as we just talked about, and I like to lift and stay healthy. Although that's as I get older, it seems like a losing battle. And
which part, the lifting or staying healthy?
Staying healthy, you know, my discipline when I'm tired or whatever just goes down. And so I recently signed up for a 6-week transformation challenge at a local gym. I've got a gym membership where I weightlift, but it's more of one of those where if you lose 20 pounds in a 6-week program, you get your money back. And so nothing motivates me more than
I was going to say, are you money motivated?
Right. So I may starve myself the last few days if I need to.
Exactly.
To be way under.
You could do some fasting. You could do some intermittent fasting. It's a real thing right now.
Right. And so, but that's what I like to do in my spare time. And you know, I'm involved in a lot of other legal activities, associations and groups and in the community, but more and more I try to weed through that stuff. And I just gave up my merit badge counseling abilities with the Scouts of America. And one of the reasons for that is because my renewal was up for youth protection, and I would do it if the troop really needed me. But it's like 3 or 4 hours. I mean, it's like 10 modules, and it just I think it's time to move on. You know, my kids have been grown and out of Scouts for at least 7 years now. My youngest, so felt it was time for someone else to take over the helm. So things like that. You know, periodically I'll try to figure out what it is that I don't need to be doing.
Yeah, and so, but as I listened to you, and I mean, I read a little bit about your bio, and then I listened to you. What do you what is it that you feel like you want to be known for? Like, what is it? Because you seem like you're doing a lot, and I'm like, okay, what's your goal here? What's your mission?
Right. Yeah, but, you know, the biggest goal, and I've really been focusing more on this. If you follow me on LinkedIn, and those that do, is one of the things that I've started doing when I went in-house in the non-litigation role back in '96. I've been doing privacy and cyber before cyber was even a word, developing proactive plans, reactive plans to hacks and data breaches. And so one of the things that I'm really focused on and want to be known for is that slice. I think that as you look at the world and what we see happening, the number of attacks, the continued debate about whether or not you can somehow put the genie back in the bottle of all the data that you use, when we all have these little things that have more computer power than the Brainiac and all the other computers, back in the 50s that took up entire rooms and warehouses. And so that's really where I see myself being unique. Like I said, I've got a number of buckets that I practice in. One is the only real industry focus or expertise that I have is all of my time in house, those 16 and a half years, and then in that kind of transient roles that we talked about. We're all at large insurance companies, and so I have particular and somewhat unique expertise in the mergers and acquisitions front, in licensing, in dealing with governmental and regulatory hurdles that clients need to get to and through. And that's a small sliver, and there's a lot of firms out there doing that. And then, I because of my in-house and combination of the clients I've had over the years, I also can function and do function as an outside general counsel, helping companies of all sizes from cradle to grave, whether it's formation, fundraising, and governance. But again, that privacy and cyber, there are a lot of people in that space as well, but there's not many people like myself that have been both in the insurance piece of it and in the actual privacy and principles and kind of dealing with this stuff since the late 90s.
So, and that's important for people to know, the unique part of it. You just never had any thoughts of other types of law, like criminal or personal injury or anything like that? Never.
Well, funny you should ask. The one thing that I thought I was going to do in law school, like I said, I was a part-time student. I took a lot of trial advocacy, a lot of evidence, a lot of classes for being a litigator, and I always kind of imagined myself as an assistant U.S. attorney, and for a variety of reasons that just never happened. As I probably started to think about that. Was having a family and buying a house, and so it didn't work out. But I still, when I first started in private practice as well, like I said, I was a litigator, and so that's what I thought I would be doing in some criminal law. Personal injury, I've never, I've thought about it. I have one of my best friends that I started in private practice with. He was somebody that was always saying, "Look at all these plaintiffs; they're all, full of it." And we were representing insurance or corporations. And then a few years later, he turned around and became a plaintiff's lawyer. And he called me up and he said, "Look at all these insurance companies and defendants. They're all full of it. And I can't believe the roadblocks they put up." I said, "Wait a second. Let's go back in the Wayback Machine.
Yeah.
And you want to listen to yourself talking about the other side of the coin." So, I think for those in law school, I think personal injury, I think criminal prosecutors or public defenders, I think all three of those are fantastic ways if you want to be in court, because there's nothing like it, in terms of the activity and experiences, especially if you're working, like you said, in criminal, because, you're getting cases, you have to think on your feet, you don't have time to prepare, there's no discovery per se. And so a lot of the plaintiffs' lawyers, in fact, that are prominent in Chicago and across the country that I know, cut their teeth at the public defenders or at the states or U.S. attorney's office, because it is such good experience.
Yeah.
But, if I had to do it all over again, would I have done something different? Would I have stayed in house? Would I have, stayed a litigant? I don't know. It's hard to tell this.
Yeah. Hard to tell. Right now you're into lifting, so.
That's right.
Mentoring. You like to do a lot of mentoring, right?
I do. And I probably, at any given time, I probably have 2 to 3 law students and a lot of young lawyers that are mentees of mine, including one of my partners at the firm. We came over here together. He was in I taught law school for a while. He was in my first insurance law class, and then reached out to me to ask about mentoring. And it's been a really a mutual relationship, all these mentoring relationships, because the younger attorneys, again, they have a different perspective, different, different how they came up. More and more, all these folks have been in the age of the computer. Some are getting to the point where smartphones have always been part of their existence, so it's good. And I do love mentoring and giving back that way. And
I like the mentoring too. And I work with a lot of attorneys, like as far as coaching and training them with the communications, empathy, relationships, all of that. Do you think the younger attorneys are better at it, or it's still a challenge even with the younger, newer attorneys, or what?
There are a lot of different opinions, but my observation is that it continues to be somewhat problematic. And the reason for that is any size firm, when associates are young, the billable hour is the king and queen of their existence, right? And that's really what's focused on. And I gave a speech or a presentation at our associates meeting in December when we have our firm gatherings up in Michigan. And one of the things I said is don't make the mistake of waiting or not doing any business development, because it's like anything else. You can only be as good at it in networking and communication and business development. It's practice like anything else. And there's a lot of you probably know much more than I do from coaching, but the different generations, there's all this talk about whether they're more social or not, to the current generations. And I look back to like my parents, and I'm not sure how social and interactive they were with other adults back in those days. So right, it's probably just recency bias that kind of tells us that somehow this current generation just isn't interested in networking or socializing. I don't really know.
I don't know. Yeah. Business development. Talk a little bit about that.
Sure. I'm at it 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. To me, almost every situation is business development without being overall sales all the time. And I tell people when I talk about mentoring and networking, your classmates, your undergraduate people, your condo mates, your apartment residents, the person that's working at Starbucks, you just never know. I have a friend that was mostly doing plaintiff's work in Chicago and some other stuff. Long story on why he gave it up, but he was working in one of the downtown Chicago Starbucks to get money so he can pay for replacement tires on his car. And he ended up getting fired from it because he was so chatty and he was just behind the counter and was giving out free gift cards because people's orders were always late and stuff. But you just never know. One of the best pieces of advice my father-in-law, who worked for the Illinois Department of Employment Security, ever told my wife and I is treat people on the way up and subordinates as you would treat anyone, and treat everybody because you do, they all, number one, you don't know where they're coming from. Number two, they eventually could be your boss, and that happened to him, and it happens, and I've seen that in practice. So it's one of the things on business development for me is really again, through those movements I've had loyal clients, and the thing that's loyal about them is a couple of things. One is they got to know me as a person and who I am. Number two, they build a trust in me and in the quality of my services. In that insurance space that we talked about earlier, almost all the business I get there is either opposite sides of deals I've worked on, or people that when I was in-house or in private practice assisting insurance companies, that they've gotten my wisdom and experience. And so it's not what I do tell folks is that business development is not easy. It's again, it's something, and you read any kind of sales, the number of warm touches, and it used to be like 6, I think, before you establish a rapport. Now with COVID, or even before COVID, it's now 15 or whatever touches it is, and whatever you count as a touch, but it's a lot of work, right? And what happens with most attorneys that I know is that they get swamped, and then their plate's so full, they ignore that for a couple of months or whatever while they're dealing with the big cases, and then trying to get back into it. It's just, again, it's like exercise, or like almost anything. It's routine, and having that kind of experience to be able to keep doing it, so that you always have something coming on the plate as the plate.
You got to keep another bus coming is what you got to do, right?
Right.
Just
right.
On a regular basis. And it's the same actually for retaining clients. I mean, we don't want to get complacent, because just because you got a client doesn't mean you're going to keep them. Right. I mean, if you do all the right things, you'll keep them, but it's just as much work to keep them and keep going and not get complacent. And you get that high and everything of getting the client, and you see all these things you're going to do, and then all of a sudden you've got the relationship. You're married now. There's no more dating game, right? So you still got to keep working at it.
Yeah, it's constant, right? And again, that's an excellent point, because it's easier to give efforts to retain those clients, because again, just everybody. What I said at one firm I was at one time, this is the managing partner and I, we both said we want to be somebody's guy, right? Because if you ask for a plumber, or I've got a guy, you lawn service, tailor, I've got a guy. You've always got a guy, right? And you want to be the guy. And like you said, it's like gardening. You have to constantly weed it out and nourish it and make sure that the harvest comes. And so it's it's not easy, because again, in any professional space, no matter what you're selling, that there's a lot of competition. And while all of us, if you look at our websites or you look at different things, we all try to distinguish ourselves as being the greatest thing. There's a lot of fungibility. So again, it comes down to that trust, and are you being pragmatic and doing the right things for your clients so that they can advance their needs.
Holding yourself to a high standard. So talk a little bit about the fundraising.
Sure.
It's really interesting. I think everybody would like to hear about that.
Sure. So in the late 1990s, I started to enter powerlifting competitions locally in Chicago. One of my undergraduate college buddies and teammates said, that way it gives you something to focus on. And then I proposed in like early 2001, 2002. I went to the Chicago Bar Association Young Lawyers section and said, I'm going to be lifting anyway. What do you think about doing a fundraiser for a group called Lawyers Lend a Hand to Youth, which was a group that was about 10 years old by then, that focused on inner city one-on-one mentoring programs for disadvantaged communities. And so the first year I did it in 2002. I didn't have as big of a Rolodex, or nobody knew about it.
They don't use Rolodex anymore.
I know.
There's no more Rolodex.
Right. Shows you I'm getting old. And my BlackBerry phone list,
oh,
whatever
no
it was.
Blackberries either. Come on.
Nobody has BlackBerries either.
Before you know it, you're going to say Palm Pilot.
Right. And using WordPerfect and Lotus 1, 2, 3. But I raised $2,500 in that first lifting raise, and then in 2014 I did my last full powerlifting meet, raising money for Lawyers Lend a Hand, and personally raised $70,000. I had a great platform. I was a Chicago Bar president that year, and so I announced it at my installation. And then I did one more meet in 2019. The group was trying to find money to build an actual office space in the building they were in. And so we raised just about $12,000 that time, and really didn't really make a huge push for it that time. And it had been 5 years since we'd really reached out to the to the network. So overall, we raised about $325,000, I think is the total number.
That's amazing.
And yeah, and I've thought about doing it again, but again, I'm 56. I don't know if I want to
That's so old.
get ready for that anymore. My youngest son, he just moved. He's not a lawyer, but he's big into lifting, and so I've tried to convince him that he should take up the torch and do it for something. But he's not ready to compete, so that's fine.
Yeah, that's good. All right. Well, is there anything else you'd like everybody to know about you? And how can they get in touch with you also if they?
Sure. So I'm at howardandhoward.com. So it's what I always say, it's two of the three Stooges, the Howard brothers, but they're not related. I just for ease, it's howardandhoward.com. My email is DAC, my three initials, at h2law.com. And so it can always be reached there. And I have a wide variety of interests, including the Chief Justices. I write a weekly column in the Chicago Daily Law Bulletin, mostly about the Supreme Court and rule of law, some history built in, and some data and cyber occasionally.
Yeah.
And I really love meeting with clients, and again, whether they retain me or not, more to just chat about their goals and aspirations, and especially for startups or those that are in the next stages. It's always just good to hear what's going on and lend them some encouragement and guidance if I can.
Encouragement and guidance, that's good. And then at the same time, you're becoming their guy.
There you go.
Right?
Right.
It all works.
Right.
All right. Well, thank you so much. Wonderful. And all right, everyone. So long. Thank you again for joining us today with Lawyers Tell All. Bye, everybody.
Thank you for tuning in to Lawyers Tell All, where Chris Mullins takes you on a journey with lawyers in the trenches who show you the realities of what it takes to succeed in this chaotic, crowded, ever-changing profession. Remember to visit our website at www.lawyerstellall.com and enjoy even more great episodes like this one. Again, while you're here, subscribe to us via your favorite network. We look forward to seeing you next time on Lawyers Tell All.